training film designed to instruct the Allied soldier in the recognition of German uniforms, badges of rank, and insignia, to acquaint him with enemy weapons likely to be found in the field, and to show him the methods used by a typical German squad against an Allied infantry outpost. No, these are not German soldiers. They may look like it, but they're not. Here you see G.I. Joe doing just another job that the U.S. Army has called upon him to do. This work is considered vitally important. The group shown in this film are enlisted men of a mobile intelligence training unit. They have intimate knowledge of our enemy's clothing, equipment, methods, and, yes, his language, for many in these units speak German. They demonstrate this knowledge at Army bases in the war zone in the hope that the first time you see an enemy soldier, you won't waste time asking yourself a lot of silly questions. Those of you who expect to take part in close engagements with the Germans will naturally watch this film with interest and try to remember what you see. In the front lines, it will be taken for granted that you know who you're fighting and what he looks like. But others may be in supply, transportation, medical corps, or perhaps in the mess, and may expect never to get a very close look at the enemy. Remember, Uncle Sam has given you a rifle. He has trained you to use it. The enemy we are fighting in Europe today is a master at flanking movements. He often tries infiltration methods and may appear where you don't expect him. So even if you pound a typewriter or play nursemaid to a peep, you may have to grab that rifle and fight like hell. Let's take the group we see here. Under the usual conditions of warfare in wooded areas, these men, let's call them Germans, these Germans might easily be the subjects of observation by an Allied reconnaissance patrol, and Allied headquarters could sift the information obtained. The number of men, branch of service, direction in which they're marching, their regiment, company, and the rank of each man. Supplied with such details, our intelligence could make plans that might result in the elimination of not only this squad, but of the larger unit to which it's attached. First of all, a brief look at the basic uniform, the field gray or gray-green, worn by the greater portion of German ground troops. The helmet, with an apron or shelf protecting the nape of the neck, running along the sides to form a sort of visor over the forehead. Painted on the left side is the Army and Navy emblem, the standing eagle grasping a swastika in its claws. On the right side, a shield showing the national colors. Now, when he goes into combat, the German frequently removes these little embellishments. He's smart enough to know what nice targets they'd make. This man has cut a neat piece out of somebody's inner tube and has stretched it around the lower part of his helmet. Most of the German infantry use this trick for the same purpose as the netting used by some Allied troops. A few leaves, a little grass, and with the tubing to hold it in place, he has his camouflage. The national emblem, a formal standing eagle with swastika, is worn by all German ground forces. The regular army wears it on the right breast of the field jacket. Ammunition pouches, 3 worn on each side. This infantryman goes into combat with 60 rounds of .31 caliber ammunition, 10 rounds in each of the 6 pouches. Running diagonally across his chest is the strap for the gas mask. If you think your gas mask is a headache, you don't know what trouble is until you've tried a long march with this ingenious article. It's a perpetual motion machine. Take a step and it flies up to your shoulder, take another and it bounces down, giving an overall boost of about 3 feet up the road. Apparently, the old Prussian warlords who have been running the army for years began to have doubts about their own invincibility when they designed this buckle. The inscription "Gott mit uns" means God is with us, and was counted on to bolster the confidence of their soldiers long before the present regime took over. There is one especially characteristic item of clothing worn by all services except flying personnel of the Air Force: the high black boots. Along with the color of the uniform, these black boots should be well remembered as being one of your surest means of identification. So here is the essential German soldier. Helmet, very like the U.S. helmet, except for the extended apron on the sides and in the rear. Also, it has a slightly angular appearance where the U.S. helmet appears more round, more globe-like. The Standing Eagle on the right breast of the field jacket. 6 ammunition pouches, 3 on the right, 3 on the left. 60 rounds capacity. Strap crossing diagonally to the gas mask. It rests on his left hip. Gott mit uns. Remember the dull silvery buckle. Then the soft black boot coming almost to the knee. One of the best means of identification. Generally speaking, but with a few exceptions which we will take up separately, all ranks of German ground troops in the field will wear the basic gray-green uniform that is shown here. Now, in all the armies of the world, whether Russian, British, or Chinese, there is one little man who is very similar. The private. Everything is done for his comfort. He's spoiled by everyone from the general on down. They give him gifts such as clothing, snappy new rifles, shining buttons, and his personal problems are all handled by his noble and understanding friend, the sergeant. Added to all these, the German private is presented with this pip, worn on the left sleeve as a reward for good conduct and attention to duty during his 1 year of basic training. His pay, however, remains the same. But you can't keep a good man down. Soon after getting the pip, the ordinary private has stepped up a notch and becomes a full-fledged PFC. So 1 chevron, private first class. Let's say a man were found to possess unusual power to lead his fellows in the field of combat. The lucky man would, of course, become a corporal and proudly bear the distinguishing sign of his rank, 2 chevrons on the left sleeve. The Germans believe in rapid promotions. After serving as a corporal for 6 years or more, he not only has his 2 chevrons, but he gets the pip as well. The group of non-commissioned officers begins with the buck sergeant, not with the corporal as in the United States Army. He no longer wears his chevrons. Instead, a band of white tape is sewn along the top edge of the shoulder strap with a small space left open at the outer end. Also, he wears a white band along the edge of his collar. Beginning with the buck sergeant, we can identify all ranks by looking at the shoulder straps. By the simple trick of sewing a little strip of white tape along the open end of the strap, we create a staff sergeant. Yes, we know what you would all like to give the first sergeant. But let's give him just a silvery pip. 1 pip, white band along the top, the German equivalent to a first sergeant. The old reliable master sergeant struggles along with 2 pips. And if you don't think he's been soldiering for a long time, you don't know your German army. Here is a gent who has been an NCO and may someday be an officer. He's the warrant officer and his pips total 3. Enemy personnel are strictly ordered to dispose of their shoulder straps in battle areas. This is because of the number, which you have noticed, is generally embroidered on them. That number tells us a man's regiment. On the large button, we see his company number. During the early years of the war, it was common for the enemy soldier to carry it in his pocket. It is possible that some may still be careless enough to do this. So if you find one on a prisoner, don't keep it as a souvenir. See that it reaches your intelligence officer. This applies to any article found on enemy personnel. It may only be a scrap of paper, but your duty is to hand it in for interpretation. Something new has been added. A metallic thread sewn on narrow bands running lengthwise on the strap, but no pips. The 2nd lieutenant. This 1 pip on the plain silver strap shows the rank of 1st lieutenant. For the highest of the company grade officers, 2 pips for the captain. Majors, lieutenant colonels, and colonels are field grade officers, and their group brings us to another and more elaborate design, an effect of braided bands made of the same silvery metallic thread. The major here has something in common with the 2nd lieutenant. He has no pips. The lieutenant colonel has 1 pip, and for the colonel, just 2 pips. Now let's review. No pips for the private, the 2nd lieutenant, the major. 1 pip, 1st sergeant, 1st lieutenant, lieutenant colonel. 2 pips, master sergeant, captain, colonel. You never know. Someday you may capture a German general. So just to make sure you would know who he was, here's the shoulder strap of a brigadier. The same device is used to denote rank. 1 pip, a major general, 2 for the lieutenant general, and for the full general, 3 pips. Notice that this strap is surrounded by a dark red border. That simply means general officer. But if you ever see an officer below the rank of general or an enlisted man with a red band around the edge of his shoulder strap, that would indicate artillery. This edging or piping is used to denote branch of service. For example, the infantrymen we saw lounging around the bank of a stream. Their branch color, or Waffenfarben, as they call it, is white. The very narrow white edging tells us that the owner of this shoulder strap is in the infantry. Lemon yellow, signals. Wherever there are men wearing this color, you may expect an important command headquarters not far away. Pink for tanks. Very likely you'll see the tanks first. If you do, then it's fairly safe to conclude that the men in them belong to the tank corps and that their colored piping or edging will look like this. Yes, they have a special uniform and their own insignia, the skull and crossed bones. The subject of German tanks brings us naturally to the Panzer Grenadiers, motorized infantry in support of tanks. Their color, grass green. Red is for the artillery. This is easy to remember for the simple reason that in most of the armies of the world, artillery is represented by this color. Thus we come to the last of the 6 colors used by the 6 main services of the German army. This black piping is worn by the engineers. The collar device, noticeable on every German army uniform, is called Kragenspiegel, and at one time carried the branch color. Now it is simply a decoration, and only rarely is any color included except the silver of the thread from which it's made. It is noticeable among officers that the higher the rank, the richer and more elaborate is the composition of the collar device.